Hey, 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 hey. Put down that deviled egg. That's the fourth one you've had. Make sure somebody else gets a turn.
All right, guys. New night. Had to step away and shut it down the other night. So let's pick it up where we left off with doing this handlebar wiring, okay? Now, I picked these up the other day just to where I could have a set of crimps here at the house. And honestly, I'm liking these things so far. These are a regular open barrel type crimping tool like I have used for years and years. But one difference on these. These, if you notice, here on the jaws, if I can get the light on, there, you can see them there. These are a compound leverage crimper. See how they come together? The big difference between these and the ones that I've used for the last 20 odd years, the ones that I normally use, they're just conventional pliers where they've got a common hinge point. And sometimes those things have a bad tendency to mash a terminal sideways a little bit, and it crimps kind of funky and kind of ugly. So, every now and then you got an oopsie you got to redo. These, with the way these are compound leverage pliers, when you squeeze them closed, the jaws stay parallel to one another. I'm liking this. I'll make sure that I put a link for these down in the description on this. That way, if you're interested, you can go check them out for yourself. But I'm thinking that I may take these things to the shop and, put them through their paces on the daily and see how they hold up long term. But I may end up buying me another pair to keep at work and retire my old ones. So we're here putting together all the terminals for the wire harness extensions on Liberty Risk, and I forgot to strip that one. I missed that. I got to pick that up here in a minute because I'm going to need that guy. This is what I was talking about. These little bitty, and I mean itty bitty, they're damn small, y'all. These are a non-insulated butt splice. It's the same thing as like a regular red, blue, yellow butt connector, except smaller, and it doesn't have all the insulation on the outside. These are exposed. Basically, all they are is just a little hollow metal tube. Take that, take your wire, put it in there, squeeze it, crimp, done. Rinse, lather, repeat 26 more times because we've got 13 wires we're having to extend in this switch case. I haven't counted the wires in the other one yet. Now, I know a lot of people are going to poo-poo on me whenever I say these butt splice connectors are perfectly fine to use in your handlebars. They are. And I have used these for years for doing extensions where it didn't warrant soldering and shrink tubing. Now, if you've got a motorcycle that is a new motorcycle that's fuel injected that uses fly-by-wire throttle, i.e. electronic throttle, no throttle cables, absolutely solder and shrink tube. Because if you don't, you always run the risk of having drivability issues due to varying amounts of resistance through the crimp terminals that you use and how good of a connection you're making there. They are extremely sensitive to that. I got my ass burnt by a fly-by-wire Harley several years ago from that, and I learned my lesson. Now, I know a lot of people will say that these open barrel terminal pliers are not what you need to use for doing these butt splice crimps. The bigger stuff, I wholeheartedly agree with you. On these little bitty guys, because, here. You see how small that is? These things are rated for 24 to 28 gauge wire, okay? They're really damn small. I'm using 20 gauge wire right here, and it just barely fits in there when it's stripped to where I can crimp it. Now I'm going to try to get you guys up close and personal here to where you can see how these types of terminal pliers crimp on these little small ones. Let's see if she'll focus. Hey, it focused. See what I'm talking about though? When you use those open barrel crimp pliers, it swedges the body of that butt connector down from 3 different sides, because you've got the V shape of one side of the jaws and you've got the crimp post on the other side. These things are stupid stout. They won't pull out of there. You're not going to have a problem with wire connectivity or anything like that. By the way, some of y'all may be wondering why I'm wearing an Amazon box on my head. Right now I'm trying to channel my inner telepathic powers to get Buddy Bezos to get my bolts to me that I ordered that were supposed to have been here 2 days ago. I need my bolts. So anyway, like I was saying, just to kind of recap, pick up where I left off at. Just in a nutshell, 1/4 inch strips. Make sure you keep all your strips the same length. That way your wire extensions all come out being the same length whenever you crimp your butt splices on there. And then make sure you got a good solid crimp on your butt splice and you won't have any problems. See if I can get you guys a little closer and you can see what I'm doing here. Really damn small butt splice. Really damn small wire. Now you want to crimp it, but you don't want to go all kinds of Leroy Jenkins on it to where you worry about over crimping it and breaking the wire strand inside the terminal, because that's about the only time I have problems using these little guys. Okay, so we got all of our extensions made up. Now we got to go through here on our factory harness. We got to go down and we got to do all of our strips here to where we can marry it all together. And again, make sure that you're stripping an equal amount off of the end of each wire. That way all of your wires come out the same finished length when it's all said and done. Oop, got him just a wee bit short. Need to take a little bit more off of that one. Okay, there we go. Oop, already did him. Yes, 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 no. And lastly, you. Okay, now just start marrying up all your extensions. Just go down the row and start crimping them in place. Now, I'm not going to hold you guys hostage here and make you watch me crimp every single one of these freaking things, because that just makes for riveting television. Not. I'll be back here in a minute whenever I got this done and we're ready to move on to the next step, okay? Think of this as go grab snackies intermission time. Boop. Okay, so we got all of our wire extensions connected. We got all the little individual pieces of heat shrink on our splices. Here, I'll show you guys. Looks like a big mess of copper spaghetti, right? Well, it is right now, but take note. See here where we've got our individual butt splices tied into where we made our harness extensions? Each one of those things has got a little bitty piece of thin wall shrink tube that's covered on top of it, and that provides your initial layer of insulation. But we're not done yet. We're not going to run all this crap down through the handlebars. So remember a little bit ago whenever I told you guys use your camera, take a picture of the backside of these connector plugs that shows where the wires go in and everything? Yeah, it's that time, y'all. You can buy commercially available depinning tools to get the wire terminals to release from their connector bodies. But what I did here is I had this little janky El Cheapo pocket screwdriver, and I've had this thing kicking around for a while now. Short trip over on the bench grinder, and I ground a little bit of a profile on that thing. And if I catch the light on it where it shines, yep, you'll see it right there. It's thin, it's skinny, but the thing is, it gets in there to where you can push down the locking tab on the individual terminals and pull them out of the connector bodies. We got to do that. That way we can get all of our wires fished down through the shrink tube, and then we got to leave them off because that connector body is not going to fit through the holes we drilled in the handlebars. We'll worry about reconnecting the connectors once we get the wires pulled through the bars and we get the bars hung on the bike. But if you look closely, inside the end of that connector body, focus. If you look close in the end of that connector, you notice one side of these right here, it's got that little notch. Well, that's where this guy comes in handy. What you do is you take that and you gently push your wire forward in the connector block. You take your D-pin tool that you made or bought, whichever, whatever, push that in there, and you'll feel a little tab that lifts up. It's almost like a little spring. Push that and give it a little wiggle. Of course, I get the redheaded stepchild whenever I'm trying to show it on video. Damn. I say plenty of bad language words. There. You see that little spring tab that you're trying to push down to get that to release from the connector body? That's what you're fighting against. Be patient. Go slow. They will come out. All right, guys. Cheating trick here. Whenever you got to pull your wires through a piece of shrink tube, especially if it's kind of long run or it's kind of tight and skinny, take a coat hanger wire, straighten that sucker out, run that through your shrink tube, and then tape it off to your wires. That way you can pull them through instead of trying to cram them through there. Y'all ever tried pushing a chain? That shit ain't easy. Neither is pushing wires up through the inside of a piece of shrink tube like that, especially when you got a run that's almost 3 foot long. Okay, for little pieces here and there, cigarette lighter, a little butane torch, that's totally fine for doing shrink tube. Now, when you're coming to a big run like what we got all this handlebar wiring going into, break down, buy you a cheap heat gun. They're 15, 20 bucks tops for one, at Walmart or Harbor Freight, something like that. If you have to, go rob the significant other's hairdryer. Yes, they work just as good, okay?
What?
Yeah, I said what I said.
No!
Do it. Now, you want to start this on the end up here in the switch case because you want to get that shrunk down and get that locked in the pocket, so to speak, before you move on. Just work your way down. Now, whenever you're doing this stuff, you want to make sure that you heat it evenly as you're working your way down the length of the wire run, but don't linger in one spot too long. That way you don't accidentally blister your shrink tube. It's not going to be that big of a deal if it's part of the part that goes inside the handlebar, but it's damn sure going to look ugly if it's on the part that hangs outside the handlebar once it exits. Not to mention the fact that you're compromising your shrink tube and its insulating abilities if you do blister it, because if you blister it, it loses its flexibility and it gets real brittle and it gets crunchy and it'll start cracking in that area. So you don't want to overdo it and overcook it. Now, this stuff that I'm using, it's a 3-to-1 shrink ratio. It'll pull down there pretty tight. And also, as a plus, this is actually a marine grade shrink tube to where it's dual layer. It's got a layer of glue on the inside of it that comes out and it bonds everything together and locks it solid in place after it flows out and it cures. So not only does it help stabilize the wires to where nothing gets tugged or pulled out of place, it also adds a pretty high level of waterproofing while you're at it. That and this stuff is typically a little bit thicker than what your conventional run-of-the-mill average 2-to-1 shrink tube is. So it gives you a little bit more thickness and a little bit more abrasion protection in areas where the wiring may flex on the regular, like where it comes out of the handlebars and goes down onto the frame neck where it plugs in the wiring harness, things like that. Is it absolutely necessary? No. Regular single wall shrink tube will work just fine for this. But I always like to kind of plan ahead for the Murphy factor, if you will, just in case. Because trust me, if something can screw up, generally it happens to me. I know this is riveting video right now, but you guys can see how this stuff pulls down as it's heated. And if you look close, as this stuff gets hot and gets activated, you can see how it starts getting kind of shiny. It starts getting kind of a glossy look to it. Whenever it starts getting that, that's when it's shrunk down about as far as it's going to go, and that's telling you need to move on down the line, because if you linger for too much longer, you're going to end up blistering it and it's going to get crunchy, and that's not what we want. Now, if you guys are looking for some of this double wall marine grade heat shrink, I'll have some links for it down in the description on this video. And also, I've got a pretty good write-up on this stuff, along with a bunch of other electrical stuff, electrical products that I use, tips, tricks, things like that. We got that over on the Patreon. You guys are more than welcome to go over there, sign up, check it out. It'll be in the electrical section, okay? Big pin post. Can't miss it. This is still a wee bit warm, but if you look close, you can see that little be to clear. It looks like hot glue that's oozing out of the end of that shrink tube right there where the wires are coming out. Maybe you can. Yeah, now you can. See, it looks kind of like hot glue. That's kind of sort of what it is. What that is that's an interior sealant on this double wall heat shrink. Now, it is a slight bit stiffer than normal heat shrink after it's shrunk down, but in my opinion, the trade-off is worth it for the insulating properties that it gives you, and also it just makes it a whole lot tougher. So it's not going to be nowhere near as prone to taking damage from, being flexed back and forth all the time. Also, if something accidentally gets tugged on it, or, if somebody isn't paying attention and they accidentally drop something that they really don't mean to drop, it gives you a little bit of cheap insurance. So there we go. All pretty, shrunk down. Yay, we're happy. Well, not entirely happy, not yet. We still got to get all that and all that through the handlebars. And then we got to put the plug back on here and put everything back where it's supposed to go. Y'all did take a picture, didn't you? So there's that one. And that's the biggie. The left hand, on metric bikes especially, the left-hand switch case is generally going to have more wiring in it than the right-hand switch case because it's got the horn, the turn signals, the dimmer. A lot of them also have hazard flashers, things like that. I'm not going to bore you guys with making you watch me do the same thing over on the other side. I'm going to go ahead and do it. That way I can get it done. We'll rock and roll. That way we can move forward into pulling this stuff in, and I can show you how we pull this into the handlebars. Let's get the bars back on the bike. Okay. Next night, part 2, 3, something. Anyway, shit, I can't remember at this point. Anyway, so we've got the wires in the handlebars on Liberty Risk here. Unfortunately, I can't show you guys the video on how I was pulling the wires in because, unbeknownst to me at the time, my camera battery died, and I found out the hard way that whenever my camera battery dies, it does not warn you. It doesn't beep. It doesn't do nothing. So apparently I was just talking to myself for, probably the better part of an hour. So at this point, we got the bars on. We got wires pulled through there. We've got our hand controls just roughly hanging there at this point. Let's get the headlight on this thing. Let's show you guys how the wire connections are going to go, and also show you how the wires are going to route on this thing. But first, I got to make some bolts because Buddy Bezos has yet to bring me the ones that I ordered, so I got to go cut some down. Yay. That is the sorriest put together hacksaw I've ever seen in my life.
Well, where'd you get it from?
What do you think?
That answers your question.
You guys remember my little cardboard crown from earlier in the video? Yeah. There was actually kind of sort of a purpose for that. And, hey, I had an idea in my head, and sometimes the intrusive thoughts win. But I'm going to show you why. Okay. So you're probably wondering, what's the deal with the box? What's in the box? Bad joke. Anyway, we got to put the headlight bucket together for Liberty Risk here, and one problem with that, headlights are round. They like to roll around and shit and try to run away from you when you're trying to work on them. So here's how you get around that. Take your towel so you don't scratch your chrome, lay it inside of a cardboard box like that. Then take your headlight, boom. It ain't going to go anywhere. It's a free helping hand that comes courtesy of Amazon or Walmart or wherever you just happen to get a cardboard box from. Now, one thing about motorcycles, I like being able to be seen when I'm on the road, and I like to be able to see where I'm going. So that's partly why we're going LED on this bike. This headlight in particular, I'll have you guys a link down there in the comments, or down in the description for this. This headlight's got LED light chips as a projector for both the high and the low beam, but also it's got marker lights out here to the side just to kind of help people, see you and not wind up as a pavement pizza at the end of the day. This one has the added benefit that these are switchbacks. Whenever the bike is on, they light up white just like everything else, act as marker light. But when you turn the turn signals on, these toggle from white to amber. These have the turn signals integrated into the headlight itself. That way we can get away with a clean look on the bike, but we can still have turn signals on there where people can see where we're going. Now, usually on these kits, they give you buku bunches of extra adapters and stuff like that. We're not going to be using that on this one, but we're going to hang on to this stuff for a rainy day because you never know when connectors and whatnot come in handy. especially these headlight connectors like this. These are your standard H4 bulb headlight connector, but these are ceramic. They're a high temperature connector. That way you don't have to worry about the connector melting like on some of your older Harley or metric stuff, and that's a pretty common problem.
Coffee, my lord.
Thank you. I had to have a cup of happy adulty anti-stabby anti-murder juice. Wait a minute, we can't say that. Anti-unaliving juice. So we're not going to need any of this. We're not going to use any of that. I've got connectors for that. Because the main connector for the headlight itself, we're going to hide underneath the neck shroud.
Right.
We're not using that terminal there. That's aux ground, that's high beam, that's low. So total up, I'm going to have 6 wires coming into the headlight bucket. No biggie. Don't need him. Get rid of that.
Now, what was that yellow?
That was a auxiliary output that they give you for marker light that branches off of the low beam circuit.
Ah.
See, that's the thing. The way motorcycles are normally wired up, whenever you kick the high beam on, the low beam is supposed to go out on a normal bulb. Now on the LED bulbs, whenever you kick the high beam on, it keeps the low beam lit up. That way you've got better visibility because the focal point and the focal angle of the LEDs is fixed. It doesn't change. So it's got to have the low beam running in conjunction with the high beam. That way you can see what's going on the road, you know, around you up close and further down range.
Okay.
That is your typical Harley repop headlight bucket. All our tabs match up. Yes, they do. Cool. I don't have to notch or cut nothing.
Sweet.
Just screw her down and call it a day. But we got to make all the wire connections first. And just so you guys know, this light has a standard H4 bulb connector on the back, plus it has these 3 pigtail leads. Now these are for the marker circuit, also right and left turn signal. They share a common ground off of the main ground that comes in on the headlight plug itself. Now we're going to have a extension harness that comes out of the back of this headlight bucket that's going to plug in up underneath the gas tank, but we're still going to retain this plug here in case, you know, something happens, or if we need to take the lens out of the headlight bucket. That way we don't have to take the entire headlight assembly and that fork plate and everything off the bike to be able to get the headlight off of it. Okay, so we've got 3 wires from our existing harness that we're going to be using, but we got to add 3 more. And that's going to give us, actually that factory harness is going to give us just about enough wire length there to do what we got to do, but that is going to go away because we're not going to use that. So we need 3 wires, and in this case we're going to do it just basic motorcycle color code. On Honda, all your grounds will be a green color wire, so we're going to stick with that theme. The green is going to be ground for our extension. Wait a minute, no, strike that. Our ground comes through here on black, so we're going to go black to green. We've got to figure out what our high and our low beam is, but we've also got to tie in for our keyed 12 volt, which is going to be our marker light, because we're going to keep that powered up whether the high beam is on or not. The way this is originally set up, it would have depowered that marker light whenever the high beam's on. So I'm going to do it a little bit different. That way we can keep that function on high or low. But we've also got to have our input for our right and our left hand turn signal. I don't have any brown. Poop. Honda do love their rainbow colors. I got to come up with something that I can substitute for a brown color wire, which I do not have on hand. Go figure. Okay. So instead of brown, we're going to use red because red means hot. Red is power.
What about these spools over here? You got brown in here?
I don't want to use that silicone jacket. I want to use the PVC jacket stuff for this.
All right.
Actually, in this instance, it's going to be not only better for where we're using it, but that light gauge silicone wire that I've got over there, that's that wet noodle wire.
Oh.
And the strand in it is really, really fine. And it's limber as hell, but I want to have something a little bit more robust for up here on the headlight because, think about it, it's going to flex every time you turn the handlebars.
Sure.
And that being said, I want something that's got a little bit more ass to it that I'm not worried about, you know, the strand getting overflexed and breaking. I'll get this shit right in my head in a minute, I promise. All right, slight bumpkin tip here. If you guys are putting together a harness for like a headlight bucket or something, and it runs out through a little wire grommet like that, take you a couple of zip ties and wrap them over the top of one another and cinch them down on the wire. That way it keeps the wire from getting pulled all the way back through the bucket, and it keeps you from getting your grommet pulled out of there at the same time. Okay, so our red's going to be marker, green will be right turn, blue will be left. We need to write that down. There's marker. There's left turn. There's right turn. And then we've got low beam and high beam. All right, cool. Gang's all here. Sorry, y'all. We live in two separate worlds, okay? We're over here doing motorcycle stuff. She's over in nerd land. It's complicated. Love you, Snookums. I received a gesture. I'm not going to replicate that here because this is a family show. There you go. Got a headlight. Slight sidebar here for the tool nerds in the crowd. Picked these up off Amazon the other day because honestly I was just looking for this itty bitty little tapping hammer where I could tap stuff in over on the lathe in the mill, but they got these as a combo. I'll put you a link in the description on that, but $26, they're a dead blow, plus they got brass heads on them. That's a deal. And I mean, you know, dink, ring the bell. See what I did there? It's like a mechanic's baby rattle. Hold the headlight up so I'm not banging against the chrome there. No, just hold it up like, yeah, like that. Okay.
There we go.
Had just a little bitty burr from whenever I put that thread insert in there to reduce the size of that bolt hole. We had to take a 10 millimeter hole and make it a 9.5 millimeter hole, commonly known as 3/8 by 16. So what we did is we stuck a helical in that sucker. That way we could use the bolt that we needed to use and make it fit the hole that it didn't fit in the first damn place. Actually, here, trade me sides, would you?
Yep. Oh, at least I ain't just holding the flashlight this time. I'm holding the headlight.
It's the same thing. It's just shaped a little different. Hold still! Bring back memories?
Yeah.
Okay. See, I told you, it's the same thing. It's just shaped different. No, damn it, over here.
There's not even any light that I can move.
Nah, we didn't do a whole lot of that back in the day.
No.
Okay, just kind of eyeballing here for the angle that thing's going to sit at. But we can move it later on if need be.
Without minor knocks.
Well, that is a calibrated bonk is what that is.
Percussive calibration?
No, it's a calibrated bonk. You know, it's kind of like whenever you anger your pet guard goose. Mess with the honk, you get the bonk.
Don't even get me started on geese. Bad joke. It was a bad joke and you should feel bad.
I probably should, and it probably was, but it wasn't, and I don't. Still trying to channel those telepathetic powers to Amazon where they show them my shit. Yeah. All right. I forgot to wear a shirt for you guys last week, okay? So we figured, hey, it's Thanksgiving. Why not? Let's have some fun with it, okay? So here we've got a pirate turkey with a pirate parrot riding a pirate shark. And I'm not sure who thought this was going to be a good combination, but it works, okay?
I did.
Well, yeah, she did. And then, you know, y'all know me. I like my Sasquatch. So there you go. Take it for what it is. Come on, it's funny.
Squid Boy decor.
Right? Well, it works for you.
Oh, yeah. Because that's my whole shtick.
That's going to be ugly, and there's not a damn thing I can do about that, at least not right now. Yeah, there ain't nothing I can do to make that unugly. Because we got to have that. That's the front wheel speed sensor for the speedometer. We got to have that. That's the fender tip light. And then we got that butt ugly damn bracket right there. Okay, so that's going to come out. We've got to keep that. Let me look around and see if I've got a small P-clamp. Well, it's not as small as I'd like, but it'll work. Now, I told you guys that we were going to show you how we did the cables and brake line and all that stuff on this bike. Well, oddly enough, even though we changed the bars up as much as we did,
They weren't too good.
Well, yeah, they work pretty damn good. We've got the factory cables on this thing still, and they lay in and they follow just damn near perfect. And something's bound to go wrong here, because I'm one of these type of people. It could be raining boobies and I get hit in the head with I get hit in the head with something else. The opposite. You know what I mean. But right now, we're going to go with it and see what happens. But one thing I am going to do is I'm going to show you guys how we use this universal you build it type of brake line that I like using. It's real lightweight. It's real small. You can hide this stuff anywhere. I've ran it through frame tubes. I've ran it inside of handlebars. I've ran it inside of handlebar risers. It's really versatile, and the thing is, it's extremely easy to work with, too. So hang on, check us out. Here's what we're using for brake line. It's nylon tube. Actually, this stuff is it's made by Parker Industries. It's called Paraflex line, and this is a fairly thick wall nylon hard line. Now, it is flexible. You can see it's bendy, wiggly. It's semi-rigid. Now, the cool thing is on this stuff, if you need it to form to a certain shape, say you got to make a hard bend with it, if you put this stuff in hot water, or if you're really, really careful, you heat it with a heat gun or a hair dryer, something on low temperature, you can bend it and it will soften. And it'll bend without collapsing on itself. And once you hold that shape or form or whatever bend angle you need to, get it to conform to, once it cools back down, it'll retain that shape. Now, this stuff goes together very simply. It's a compression fitting type of joint, meaning that it has a brass sleeve in the middle of a threaded connection that gets squashed down on top of the line itself, and it gets swaged down, and that's how it forms a seal. Okay, now how this stuff works, it's pretty simple, and it's actually pretty cool, too. You take your tube nut, and you slide that over the line, and then you have your compression ferrule. If you notice, it's got that little bit of a step cut where one side's square and one side's got a taper to it. That taper is going to go towards the fitting that screws into the master cylinder or caliper, whatever you're doing. And that fitting that screws in there, it has a corresponding taper to where once that gets pushed in there and squished down, it crimps down on it and it bites in, and that's how it forms a seal. These are from Drag Specialties, and you can get them in various different configurations. You can get them in 10 millimeter, 12 millimeter for the Harley crowd if you need a 7/16 line. You can get them as a straight banjo, a 35-degree banjo, a 90-degree, and then you can get them as a straight fitting like this one here that we're going to use on the master cylinder. That way it comes truly straight out of the master cylinder body to where we can make the line follow along the bars and go down the forks. Oh, noes. Don't tell me. Damn it. Can't use those. They're not metric. Sorry about that, guys. Slight change of plans there. That straight fitting that I had, I thought was 10 by 1.25, like was very common on the biggest majority of all your metric bikes. Turns out it was 3/8 by 24. Somehow some Harley parts got snuck in there on me. We can do the same thing with a 90-degree banjo. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here, that way you guys can see how this line assembles. I've got a lot of excess line laying over on the side. I just haven't cut it loose yet because I haven't exactly figured out how I want this line to route. That's why I put my throttle cables in here just temporary like. That way I can cut the line and have it follow along with the throttle cables. That way we get a nice clean look instead of having a bunch of spaghetti just flopping around in the breeze everywhere. Now, as far as the angle of that banjo goes right now, not too worried about him because I can move that pretty much any time. But our throttle cables are going to go at a slope about like so. That's where they're wanting to land. That's where they want to lay. So we're going to keep that bend down towards the bottom of the master cylinder. we'll just have the line itself follow along on a similar path along with the throttle cables. Okay, now I need that line to come up here behind the tree because I'm going to run it through a guide clamp. And then right now, see how this line curves? I'm going to use that to my advantage here because that's the natural curve of the line, and I'm just going to use that to help it follow along down the direction where I want it to go. But you take the tube nut, slide that over, and then the little brass insert, the tapered end has to go towards the banjo fitting on these. So we take that, slip it down in there, and then that just slides in until it stops and it hits a step that's on the inside of that fitting. Thread it on there. Now here's the trick on these. Whenever people use these, they constantly over tighten the crap out of them, and it pinches the hose mostly closed. The best way to get a good seal on these and not overdo it, screw it all the way down by hand where it bottoms out, and then count 4 flats on the hex of that tube nut. That's 2/3 of a turn. That's all you need to make them seal. My 11 millimeter that's cosplaying as a 7/16 does not want to cosplay very well. So like I was saying, tighten this down 4 flats. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, if you notice, there's still a little tiny gap between that tube nut and that banjo fitting on the body. That is what you want, because as long as you have that gap there, you know that you haven't over tightened and over compressed that brass sleeve and pinched the hose shut. So there's the homely ass stock brake line that we're not going to be using anymore. Do me a favor, round file that. Yeah. All right, now down here on the bottom, we're using a 35-degree fitting. We don't need a sharp bend, but we do need a little bit of a bend. That way we can get the line routed the way we want it to go and not have it crashing into the forks.
Now, I saw the hole in the banjo, but does that line up with the hole along the bolt?
Mm-mm. The banjo has a groove cut inside of it to allow fluid to pass around. Also, the banjo bolt, notice how it's a little bit of a bottleneck?
Yeah.
Yeah, that allows fluid to flow around. Also, there's a cut inside that fitting.
Yeah.
That's what allows your fluid to move and transfer pressure. Now, the thing is, when you're working with this nylon line like this, whenever you cut it, you want to make sure that you cut it nice and square. Also, you want to make sure that you make a clean cut, too. These little cheapy plastic tubing cutters, you can get them off Amazon for like $1 or so. I mean, you can find them anywhere. If you don't have one of these, or you just ain't got time to wait on one to show up, box knife, good sharp razor blade, that works totally fine. Just make sure you make the cut square and even. Make sure it's not sloped off to the side, because that will affect how these fittings seal up. Now, you don't want to make a straight beeline down to your banjo fitting, because you got to think, this front end, it's going to extend down whenever you hit a bump. So you want to leave yourself a little extra slack to allow for that extension on the front end. So we'll give it another 2 inches, call it. Rinse, lather, repeat like we did on the first one. And we got a brake line built. Now in this case, that natural curve that line's got, I've got it twisted a little bit to where it's kind of pointing towards the rear of the bike. That's partly for aesthetics, but that's also kind of a function and form thing as well, because think about it. Whenever the front end compresses, that line's going to be too long. So it's got to go somewhere. It's got to have a place to flex to. So why not make it follow the curve that's already got in it naturally? That way it's used to going that way, and you can get it to go in whatever direction you need it to flex to, but also you can keep it from winding up in the front tire. 1, 2, 3, and 4. There we go. We got a brake line made. Now, I know a lot of you folks have never seen these things before. They're like, no, it can't be that simple, and that shit ain't never going to work. Trust me, yes, it is that simple, and yes, it absolutely does work. I've used this stuff for years. Like I said, I've ran it through frame tubes. I've ran it inside of handlebars. I've used this stuff on motorcycles. I've used it on race cars. It is some awesome shit. It's easy to work with, and it's extremely versatile. You can also use this for hydraulic clutches as well, because that Paraflex hose from Parker, it's got a burst pressure of about 1,350 psi, if memory serves right. And I don't even care if you're Popeye. You ain't got enough power in you to blow one of these things out. Now, you do have to pay attention to how you've got it routed, because if it rubs up against sharp edges, or if it's rubbing against a rough surface on the regular, i.e. when it's installed in a front suspension that's going up and down all the time, it can get abraded and it can weaken and it can blow out that way. But it won't just catastrophically fail. I'm sorry. You just ain't nobody out there got enough lead in their ass to blow this stuff up. See if we snake that speed sensor wire on the inside of that slide pin for the brake caliper.
Won't rub against the...
It can still float free and be retained, but it's not going to get pinched or mashed by the brake caliper. We can pair all three of those together with a P-clamp right there. Bring them on up. Cool. And get rid of that homely ass grommet all at the same time. This is what I was talking about, guys. You want to have a little bit of a curve in the line where it comes down from where you've got it anchored on the bottom of the triple tree or the fork leg, wherever, to where you've got it clamped down here where it's going to hold it and guide it down by the brake caliper. That way, whenever you hit a bump, it'll follow this curve and it'll, not push itself over into the wheel. A zip tie has separation anxiety. I didn't know that zip ties were molded side by side like that.
I mean, it kind of makes sense once you think about it.
We got to do something about that. I don't know if it's missing a bolt or a rubber grommet or what, but man, with the way that thing rattles, that thing rattles and bangs like somebody ran over a fire hydrant with a farm combine. All right, now I'm not going to take you guys through bleeding the brakes and everything on here because, I mean, hey, let's be real. Y'all have watched me bleed brakes before. You know how I do it. Y'all know the syringe trick. We'll recap on that later on down the road on something else, but that's not what this is about. This is about getting the bars on the bike, getting the wiring done, things like that. Okay, that's a pretty decent overview on how we go about doing internal wiring on bars and routing cables, lines, things like that. I kind of feel bad that I wasn't able to show you guys how to build cables and everything because, honestly, that's kind of becoming a dying art, and most people don't do it anymore.
Plus, we weren't really anticipating on the factory cables fitting as well as they did.
I know. That worked out to our favor, but it kind of shot us in the foot as far as content for the video. Sorry, guys. I'll find something to build something for you for on something, somewhere. My turkey's sitting sideways on the damn thing. That's bullshit. I got the factory defect turkey. Yeah, that's bullshit, man. I got a fucked up turkey. There you go, folks. That's kind of just a brief and rough overview about how we internally wire handlebars, pulling the wires down through the bars, about how you route everything. That way you can wind up with a clean look when it's all said and done instead of just a bunch of wires and cables and copper spaghetti flopping everywhere in the breeze. Slight serious note here, okay? This is not a step-by-step procedure. Like I said, this is an overview, nothing more. Now, we've still got some stuff that we got to do on this. We got to plug everything in. It'll work. Trust me. I tested all this stuff on the bench. If you guys are watching this right now, especially if you're watching in the premiere, you guys are watching this on Thanksgiving. Stop and take a minute and think about what that means to you on a personal level, okay? Whether you've got family there close to you, like a lot of us are fortunate to have, or family that may be long distance away. Especially keep in mind our service members, our servicemen and servicewomen that are out there on the line doing the thing every damn day. Some of those guys, some of them are lucky enough they can make it home for the holidays. A lot of them ain't. So keep them in your thoughts. Keep them in your heart. I know we screw around a lot on this channel, and I know that we try to have fun with things, but also I try to help convey information in a very no-nonsense, no bullshit, layman's term way of, presenting information. I try to help people learn. That's why I do this stuff. Since this is the Turkey Day special, and, we're talking about Thanksgiving and all that stuff, here is y'all's assignment, okay? Here's your marching orders. Get your butt up off that couch. I know it's a struggle. Even if you got to pop a button loose here or there where you got a little breathing room, do what you got to do. Go on into the kitchen, help Granddaddy Thibodeau get all of the to-go boxes ready for the rest of the family and everything, because the thing is, If you go in there and you help her, you can get more of what you want instead of being, left with what you got left with, okay? And if you're sneaky about it, you can get you an extra slab of that pecan pie that's in there too. That's some good stuff. Anyway, guys, we're chipping away at Liberty Risk here. We're getting the control situation squared away and all that. Next on the list, we got to work some tires in for this thing. We got to put the rear fender back on it. We kind of held off on putting the rear fender back on it until we get the tires here because it just makes it a lot easier getting around to do the tire and also do some cleaning and some polishing that we're going to do while we're there. If you guys like what you see here and you like what we're doing here, go over check us out over on the Patreon. We got a lot of stuff going on over there that we really can't discuss here on the tubes, and we have some interesting conversations with some really interesting people over there. Also, want to drop a little tidbit for you guys. Christmas is right around the corner. I got a big Christmas present for everybody in the works, and no peeking, but y'all will find out about it soon enough, okay? Till then, remember, I love y'all. I'll catch you on the flip side.
Force will be with you, always.